Chapter 174, Paradise Watchman. When the television came on, the news anchor was already speaking about the crisis in Brooklyn, with short clips of the situation. The situation in Brooklyn has gotten worse, and the threat can already be classified as a Red Gate disaster. Despite the large number of freelancers, the monsters from the dungeon are able to keep growing in numbers. We think their numbers are already over 20,000, with the weakest of them being a mid-level elite tier. Isolde frowned. The anchor stretched her hand to a clip of the Brooklyn Bridge. As we can see, a mass evacuation is currently going on, as several high tiers and lord tiers have been brutally torn apart by the swarming army of Ents that is supported by an actual forest. The fight is in their terrain, hence the disadvantage. The clip showed a view of Brooklyn. Some portion of it was swallowed by tall green trees. The death rate is rapidly rising by the moment, but fortunately, one of this region's biggest guilds, the Gate Defenders Guild, has promised to attack this threat, stating that their guildmaster will be present. Thankfully, Justice Guild's Vice Guildmaster has promised to also take action with the Justice Guild's secondary combat team, as the primary team is out on raid with the Guildmaster to face the biggest blue gate yet in Antarctica. The anchor said the next words with relief. It seems Gate Defenders Guild Master's refusal has turned out to be one of the deciding factors of Brooklyn's survival. The criticisms toward him will surely see a turn. The female doctor gasped inwardly, trembling softly as she remembered her husband, Charles, who had been made the head of the secondary combat team after his summons evolution due to the mana fruit. Knowing he was heading for such a place made the doctor uncomfortable. She quickly rose to her feet and excused herself as she brought out her phone. 2 days later. Thinking about Isolde, Percival's voice made Godfrey tilt his head toward him. They both stood on the north wall, Godfrey in a white top, black pants and sneakers, while Percival wore a white top, pants and white sneakers, but his face mask was black. He lifted one of his eyebrows as Godfrey began to chuckle. I consider myself lucky. I got a girl great-looking guys like you dream about. He snickered and squatted, surveying the landscape beyond the wall. Who told you she's yours? Have you told her about your feelings? Of course. Explicitly, Isolde, I love you. Have you said that? Percival snickered as Godfrey stared at him at a loss for words. You live with 2 women and still haven't understood that word work wonders on them. Percival shook his head, smiling softly behind his mask. I've made enough declarations to insinuate my intentions, Godfrey retorted. I know, you don't need to shout, I'm just a few feet away, Percival replied in his usual calm and collected tone. Godfrey sighed, all right, I know you're jealous. Percival scoffed. Hey, I think I need to tell you something. I've been pondering about it for some days now. The sudden gravity in Percival's tone made Godfrey rise up. Percival shut his eyes. I saw the mana tree. What? After my fight with Leander, I suddenly found myself before this tree that pierced right through the sky. It was so big I couldn't even see how wide it was, and the roots are even bigger than Leander's serpent. It seemed like that entire planet was just for that tree. Percival began to explain softly. The gentle wind rustled his blue hair. I thought thousands of king-queen tiers ate tens of thousands of those fruits and brought even more back, but when I saw that tree, it was filled with fruits like it hasn't been touched since forever. Percival looked at the landscape filled with tall grass and back at Godfrey. Then 2 fruits fell before me. I could tell they came from above, as the clouds were torn apart by their fall. I came back after feeding them to my summons, Percival concluded. Godfrey was silent. He thought the mana tree was a one-time thing, but it had appeared again, and this time a little more selective. I could feel the vast potential opened up for King and Levi. King can almost bring the sea right here. He can call for it and it will answer. He can command most of the evolved sea beasts, and there's more my Leviathan can do. I can feel the pump of growth surging within me for the past few days. Once their evolution is done, we'll ascertain their tier. Godfrey blinked. This was the first time Percival sounded so emotional about something other than his family. In that moment, the very space before them tore, like it was cut open by a knife. They knew only one person who could do something like this. Gabriel, Paradise Watchman. The tear grew wider and a voice rang. Come. I think it's because of you, Godfrey said to Percival as they walked through the space tier. They were about to meet the most mysterious man in paradise. Welcome, Gabriel's voice made the young men look up. They were inside a tree with lots of books and spiral steps leading up. It was over 70 stories tall, with 2 towering pillars from the floor to the lofty ceiling. This was the tallest building in paradise, the Tower of the Watchman. At the top stood a man in a black woolen coat, holding the railing and looking down. His golden hair fell to his shoulder blades and had a beautiful sheen that Godfrey's ordinary-looking golden hair couldn't match. It felt like they weren't even looking at a man. He was pale-skinned and looked like he was in his youth. "Couldn't you have teleported us to where you are? Do we have to climb these stairs?" Percival couldn't help but ask. "I fear you have to. Using your abilities might affect my books. These books are dated back to the age before the apocalypse, and some even beyond that age. The rest are my findings on other races. I love writing." Gabriel smiled softly. "Besides, I don't trust lightning wings before fragile books." While Gabriel was speaking, Percival formed a water droplet beside Gabriel and appeared there. Gabriel raised an eyebrow. In the next moment, a golden diagram appeared, and Ballista walked out. He held out his cloak, which now looked like it had the galaxy within, and gentle swirls of golden light began to appear. Godfrey walked out of it, and Ballista lowered his head. "The entrance of a king," Gabriel chuckled, "highly impressive." Godfrey felt good. Coming from someone like Gabriel, who he speculated could be an origin tier, it meant a lot. Looking around, he discovered there was a telescope, and nothing else on this floor. "Look through that telescope," he pointed at it. Godfrey and Percival looked at each other. This man had been the one protecting paradise all this time. If he didn't want them here, he wouldn't have opened the doors of paradise. This meant he should have no agenda of hurting them. Godfrey was the first to look through the telescope. His eyes widened when he saw the manhwa tree, at least a portion of it. It was even more magnificent than Percival's elaborate descriptions. But what shocked him the most was the white-haired young man looking at a fruit at his feet. It was snow. "What's going on?" Godfrey turned to Gabriel, who smiled. "I expected that question. What you see is the manhwa tree doing its work. That young man has given up, locked himself. His potential has reached its limits and his mind seeks rest, but the manhwa tree wants evolution. It wants war, endless fighting, endless competition to ensure evolution, and that's why it brought him there, to open a new door of vast potential." Gabriel tilted his head to Percival. "Like your friend here, it evolves you to make you a vessel for the evolution of others. In the case of that young man, you, Godfrey, are one of the vessels used to force him to evolve, as he once was for you. So the one controlling the dungeons is the manhwa tree. That's the cause of all these deaths," Godfrey said. "The cause of death is conflict born out of desire. The source of the cause is the manhwa tree. As much as you would want to hate it, you enjoy its privileges." "What privileges?" Percival asked with a frown. "Your summons, the ability to fly, to punch through walls, dodge bullets, command the sea, sprout wings made of lightning, heal your wounds without bitter drugs, or preparing your minds for a shot. All those are privileges," Gabriel replied. "Both of you, your strength has caused lots of death, and it has saved few. It's down to reason. The manhwa tree sees evolution as a way of helping every life form become better versions of themselves through adapting to harsher circumstances, and the circumstances are not just dungeons. It's also the laws and rules we intelligent beings built because of this strength." Gabriel waved his hand, and space tore open. Godfrey and Percival could see Ents killing soldiers, combatants, and civilians whose summons were no match. The entire place was in chaos, and the Ents were marching for Brooklyn Bridge, which was filled with lots of people and vehicles in a massive traffic jam. Brooklyn had almost turned into a thick forest. "A dungeon break," Godfrey's expression hardened. "Go, I want you to stop it. Your friends' summons are still transitioning to their new strength. Besides, in the entire world, only your summons are bred for fights like this," Gabriel said to Godfrey. "You want him to stop an army of monsters?" Percival's face changed. "The world needs to see a humanoid summoner save them. Even if you're not one, you look a lot like us. If higher-level summoners get there, they'll level the place. This fight should be an army against an army," Gabriel stated, summoning the divine tier hoodie with a casual wave of his hand and the golden mask. After wearing it, Godfrey walked toward the rift, took a deep breath, and walked through. "I have questions, but that will wait until I return. I also need to see the full capacity of my army." "He doesn't have a bad heart, this proves it," Gabriel smiled softly. "Oh no, please God, please, I don't want to die." A woman's scream made many people on the bridge look up. From a few dozen to thousands, they looked at the space slowly tearing open above one of the bridge's stone towers. Screams burst out as people took it as the Ents opening a gateway to the bridge. It meant their doom. Lotus, who stood beside her pink orchid mantis, along with other members of the Gate Defenders Guild, maintaining order, looked up. Her pupils shrank, her heart began to pound as she prepared her mind for combat. Meanwhile, helicopters of the media flying around zoomed in on the space tier. Still in the hospital, since the doctor had to empower her blood cells to devour the cells of the half-moon fanatic summon left inside of her, Isolde watched the television. Just now, it seems like the Ents have opened a rift above the bridge. This doesn't look like good news, the news anchor said, already agitated. This live video was to showcase humanity's powerful counterattack, but if Ents fell from that rift and slaughtered people, it would only instill fear. In that moment, a man fell, landing on the stone tower. The cameras zoomed in. Wait, that isn't a monster, it's a human being. Isolde's eyes went wide. She couldn't believe it was him, that he had the courage to come out there. A smile that made her face more appealing appeared as she watched the screen with undivided attention. What's all the commotion about? Gate Defenders Guild Master Johan asked as he turned back. He had an undercut, where the sides and back of his head were shaved very short, and the hair on the top was significantly longer. He also had a full, short beard that was well maintained and connected seamlessly to his mustache. It covered his chin, cheeks, and upper lip, creating a rugged yet neat appearance, all above a broad muscular build. Before him were hundreds of summoners from his guild, clad in armor from beast parts. Since guilds had a greater population of powerful summoners than the Agent Institute, there were quite a great number of high tiers, lord tiers, and a good number of king-queen tier summoners, but none of them had unleashed their summons, as the military were still engaging the Ents and their job was to be the final barrier and make sure the Ents did not cross the bridge. There were still thousands of people who had not trained their summons for fights like this behind them. Heck, some people had giant lions with the ability to shoot flame balls and treated them like pets from the onset. The summon had naturally taken a docile personality. Some didn't even want them to fight. Charles, Falco, and others close to him looked up at the figure on the tower. They couldn't feel anything from him, not one strand of aura to at least gauge his strength. It felt like they were staring at a normal human, but there was no way a normal human would go up there at a time like this. "One of yours," Johan heard Eliza's voice. He turned to the woman approaching him. She was Vice Guild Master of Justice Guild, one of the top guilds in this region, competing fiercely for resources and dungeons with them. She had vibrant, saturated red hair that fell like a waterfall down her back, not a strand on her face. She wore a crimson combat suit made from the hide of a dragon, and a pitch-black longsword hung at her waist. Renowned as the greatest swordsman in this region and a deadly beauty, she attracted thousands of summoners annually to Justice Guild just from adverts that had her face. It was a well-established fact that she was one of the main reasons Justice Guild had an upper hand over Gate Defenders Guild. "I thought the new guy was one of yours," Johan said, visibly surprised that the man on the tower wasn't a member of the Justice Guild. "They're here," someone shouted, drawing the attention of the leaders of each guild back to Brooklyn. The entire city was now a forest, and they could see buildings crumble as that forest kept spreading out. Lots of armored vehicles drove ahead of the forest, racing for the bridge. As they drove, arrows filled the skis, heading for them, but suddenly thousands of golden-tipped arrows countered. Johan couldn't believe his eyes as these golden arrows split through the Ent archery unit arrows, shattering some midair as they continued their journey into the forest. Those were thousands upon thousands of arrows, deflected and blown apart. How? Just what? Johan turned, the same with all from both guilds, including Eliza, and their eyes widened when they saw golden-armored knights with fluttering capes wielding great bows on hundreds of cars. Some stood between the cars, the sunlight reflecting off their radiant armor. People stared at these knights, too shocked to utter a word. Their terror at the arrow rain just died out like that, and that was done by these knights. "It's a humanoid summoner. What a daring one," Eliza said with slightly narrowed eyes as she saw Ballista standing beside Godfrey with crimson armor. That thing alone summoned several hundred of these golden archers, and even with a bow of that size they shoot much faster than those beings in the forest. "He's not just a daring summoner, he's a strong one," Johan stated seriously, shooting a glance at Eliza. "He's the one the seven heads spoke about." The two of them communicated with their eyes alone. "It's that kid," Falco exclaimed, while Charles stared up at Godfrey, unable to figure out a word to say. "He's done his part, prepare a shield wall. They're coming," Johan bellowed as some vehicles began to move past them. Suddenly, a long tree spear, 9 feet long, shot out of the forest, heading for the last armored truck. Mountain, Godfrey said inwardly, and a golden diagram flared up behind the truck. A crimson, 12 feet tall massive knight appeared with a huge round shield and a pole-like weapon with a massive golden hammer head and an axe on the other side. Now an 11 king tier in blackout state, Mountain was able to block the tree spear and reflect the damage. A huge Ent, at the forefront of the Ent army within the forest, suddenly had a hole right through its chest and collapsed, the green light in its eyes dying out. The Ent lord sitting deep in the forest, on a tree whose branches formed a throne at the top, lifted his long arms and stretched forth his sharp-tipped finger. Tens of thousands of Ents, whose arms extended into shields and held spears sharp enough to pierce through steel with ease, charged out of the forest. Most were once humans who were slain. Few of them, with roots for feet, could conjure roots from the ground to bind foes. Seeing the army of Ents that had devoured Brooklyn in just days, Eliza unsheathed her sword and opened a portal. A 13-feet-tall silhouette of a feminine being appeared, but Charles' voice rang out. "Vice Guild Master Eliza, this battle isn't ours anymore." As he spoke, Mountain had already begun to summon heavy infantry knights. They emerged from swirling golden portals, numbering close to 3,509 Lord tiers. This was the pinnacle of the Golden Order's heavy infantrymen's strength. Basic knights were Lord tiers. They swiftly spread out, forming a wall of golden shields, with a towering golden barrier that spread out. Even Falco stared at this scene with shock. Thousands of arrows bounced off the translucent shield, while the golden archers, who had increased to over 1,500, began to cut down the number of the Ents. Standing on the tower, Ballista knocked an arrow on his giant bow and stretched it. "He's about to use that skill," Godfrey said as he saw the constellations etched on the arrow. It looked like the galaxy itself was within the arrow. Lightning burst out of the bow, spreading to the arrow and crackling throughout Ballista's body. Looking closely at the arrow, it would seem as if someone drew straight lines, connecting lots of stars. I dread when Ballista showcases his skills, because it drains a ton of mana, and this one is way worse than Trailblazer. Trailblazer was a one-target kill, but this skill. The air exploded as Ballista released the arrow and was forced backwards due to the recoil. He dug his ironclad boots into the floor, shattering the stone as his cloak fluttered wildly. The arrow created more explosions before it descended into the ranks of the dungeon Ents. Whoever it touched disintegrated, with a few short roots clattering to the ground. The arrow would move in a straight line, then make a swift turn, leaving nothing but barely intact corpses as it flew about like it was sentient. It also tore through large Ents with shields, leaving the front lines devastated. At this moment, Mountain and his men charged, swiftly followed by the bow knights. While the heavy infantry blocked strikes, arrows found their way through the heads of the Ents. Despite wielding 7-feet-tall bows, these bow knights were able to move swiftly with them. Mountain was a terror on the battlefield, slamming away 3 Ents with one sweep of his hammer. A huge Titan Ent, the same one Kyle saw, dashed toward Mountain, emanating the aura of a king tier. While it raced for Mountain, an Ent mage made roots burst out of the floor, wrapping around Mountain's feet. With a grunt, Mountain turned and made similar roots burst out, piercing through the Titan Ent and the mage Ent's chests, but instead of dying, they seemed to absorb it and grew bigger. Seeing this, Mountain tore the roots around his feet, looked at his hammer, and flung it at the charging Titan. It spun, and the axe side cleaved deep into the Titan Ent. Mountain tightened his grip around his shield, and spikes grew out of the once smooth edge. Then, he flung the shield. The shield sliced through dozens of Ents before it slammed into the mage Ent. The mage collapsed with the shield stuck into it. Mountain slapped a smaller Ent's head, shattering it with that casual slap, as he approached the dead Titan and pulled out his weapon. Just then, something golden and dangerously fast entered the battlefield, reaping the lives of Ents faster than the bow knights and heavy infantry. It cleared 100 Ents before it stopped, buried into the ground as it revealed itself to be a double-bladed greatsword. Tempest descended, his wings gently moving as if each of them had a life of their own. He wrapped his gauntleted hand around the hilt of the greatsword, and the runes shone. Instantly, all the Ents 300 feet around him were pulled toward him. He launched his sword, and it spun round, cutting down over 200 Ents before returning to the Chief Knight's grasp. Activating the push rune, all the Ents rushing toward him were blasted away. It feels like I'm watching an entire guild fight. There are high tiers, lord tiers, and even king tiers there. I've never seen such summoning in my life, Johan said, with disbelief clearly written on his face. Is this even possible? the news anchor gasped after being speechless for several minutes. I have never seen such a summoner in my entire life and didn't even think it would be possible. This summoner has an army of thousands of armored humanoids that are too strong to be golems. No, these aren't golems at all. My prince, your cavalry is at your command. Upon hearing lament, Godfrey knew his chief knight wanted to partake in this fight. Go ahead. Godfrey opened a portal for lament at the flank of the battlefield. It took a lot of concentration to get to that point mentally and open a portal there, but it was worth it when lament came out, clad in crimson armor, as he was already in blackout state, rising from 11.5 to 12.5. Lament's horse lifted up its forelimbs and neighed as he summoned the night cavalry. They didn't come out of vertical golden portals like the bow knights and heavy infantry, but from black portals horizontally lying on the ground. The night cavalry rose from the ground, with pitch-black horses, armor, and ghostly cloaks. Lament summoned 1,000 cavaliers, and Godfrey felt a tremendous drop in mana. Lament brandished his halberd and they charged. The earth rumbled, dust rising, as the Ent army were forced to turn to their flank but were crushed by iron hooves. No Ent could withstand 4 tons charging at them at several miles per hour. From the bridge, the summoners could see them shatter like piles of cards. The knights that were eventually brought down rose back up. The same thing made Mountain's unit frightening. Even after being stabbed or killed by an arrow, they still rose back up, maintaining the number. The trembling alone caused some summoners to fall on all fours, in order to at least maintain a fragile sense of safety. Staring at it all unfold, Johann looked at Eliza and his face hardened. This gorgeous hotcake had a frozen expression, a dangerous sign that something good was about to slip out of his grasp. He could only calm himself with the thought that Charles and Falco would give him an advantage, as they seemed to know Godfrey before now. The tide had changed. The entire world was watching this summoner, a vagabond, defending thousands and possibly Manhattan. One summoner against an army of tens of thousands. Even if he couldn't kill all, the ability to hold all of them back had made him a legend. Dirge, let's go meet the boss, Godfrey said, completely unaware of what was in some people's mind as his eyes locked on the Ent Lord. He leaped from the stone tower, sprouting lightning tendril wings, and flew into the forest. The moment he landed at a safe distance, the Ent Lord's eyes glowed. So you are the human with such force. I didn't expect this, it said, as the tree it sat on bent for the Ent Lord to step down. Godfrey manifested a longsword and aimed it at the Ent Lord. It's strange, the stronger I get, the more I meet talking dungeon bosses. The Ent Lord tilted its head. You should have at least brought some of your soldiers with you. Can you see how? As it spoke, Godfrey saw the tree archers soundlessly on trees, aiming at him. Titan Ents, beast Ents that looked like big cats, all sprouted from what were once trees. Godfrey was certain those were trees, but the Ent Lord had somehow turned them into a unit of over 800 Ents. You are surrounded, the Ent Lord said, but to its surprise, a diagram flared up and a female knight, who looked like a tall goddess in comparison to the 191 cm tall Godfrey, stepped out. She raised her wand and blast mist burst out, spreading like a domain of icy black mist billowing from the floor. From there, almost 350 shadows of demon orcs, a three-eyed summon, and a huge gorilla emerged. The gorilla roared, pounding its chest. It echoed like a war drum as the shadow summon bared its fangs. This looks fair, Godfrey said, and both armies clashed. The three-eyed shadow fired pressurized beams from its third eye, hitting the archers faster than they could shoot their arrows. It was like a sniper, but with limitless bullets. Its beams blew up the limbs, heads, and chests of the Ent archers, eliminating their threat, as the shadow demon orcs clashed with Ents, dominating with brute strength. Most of them were king tiers, with 2 summons touching the base of the throne tier. The gorilla slammed his fist down on a Titan Ent, shattering the shield and smashing the head of the Ent in. A hound made of bark, roots, and moss lunged at it, only to be grabbed as the gorilla tore its head off. As powerful as Dirge's army was, they were limited to fighting within her Banshee domain, which was ever expanding as she grew stronger. Currently, it could reach a 400 feet radius, wide enough for each shadow to fight comfortably. Godfrey took out a white jade and absorbed it. These knights were no different from mana-devouring abyssal pits. They offered overwhelming advantages in return, and with external mana absorption, he could at least manage them, but going all out like this constantly would drain him severely. Which was why he needed to end this fight quickly. With this in mind, Godfrey shot forward. Golden armor covered his entire body as he blitzed forward, but the Ent Lord vanished. Godfrey noticed the trees were slowly moving around him, so he swung his longsword, cutting them down. In the process, he saw the Ent Lord, an arrow shot from the back of its palm, heading for him. Godfrey leaned, watching it move past him. It struck the ground and a tree sprouted out. That sight made his eyes narrow. This meant healing was useless. A cut and a whole tree might grow out of him, and his corpse would be its fertilizer. It's strong. Using blackout state right now will drain even more mana, shortening what my summons can use, he thought while dodging more arrows. They grew into towering trees as if boxing him in, but utilizing his size, he leapt out in time. Just then he saw the Ent Lord before him, its fist heading straight for his face. Mountain! A portal flared up behind the Ent Lord, as a huge hammer came swinging toward the back of its head. The Ent Lord lifted its hand to block the blow, and Godfrey swiftly activated Mana Slash, unleashing a golden wave from the longsword that sliced off the Ent Lord's other arm. That was a blow aimed for its head, but it managed to tilt in time, receiving a devastating bash from Mountain. It staggered, shaking its head. That attack stunned it, but it wasn't able to deal any good damage. Stunned, upon hearing that, the Ent Lord was shocked to discover Godfrey just above him. It swiftly spun, but that was what Godfrey expected. Grabbing the Ent Lord's branching horns, Godfrey swung himself, plunging his longsword through its eyes. It roared, reached out to pull out the longsword, only for Mountain to slam the hammer into its knees. Even if it couldn't shatter its leg, the blow made the Ent Lord fall on one knee. Godfrey activated Lightning Descent, and lightning fell from the sky, striking the Ent Lord. It roared in agony. I won't let you live. The Ent Lord forced the entire forest inward. The sky was covered in an instant, roots filled the earth, tens of thousands of them latching onto Godfrey in an instant. Everyone outside was shocked speechless when the entire forest suddenly condensed into a towering ball. It looked like a hill in the ruined expanse of Brooklyn. All the tree soldiers were gone, leaving the Golden Knights. What's going on? Isolde didn't even know when her fingers latched tightly to the white bedsheets as she stared at the massive ball made of millions of roots and trees. Godfrey found himself stuck within a dark space. His limbs were attached to countless roots and vines. Take in your last moments, human. This darkness shall be your last sight, a voice echoed. Thank you, Godfrey replied, his eyes shut as he retrieved all his summons. Even I had to admit that your army was troublesome, and without them I'm free. He figured this Ent Lord loved to make a scene. It wanted him to feel helplessness and fear, then die within even before physically dying. For that, he would also let it know none of that was working. At that moment, his sclera turned black. His tier skyrocketed to 17.5, and he activated Sun Annihilation. It flared up, roasting everything within but couldn't reach the outer layer. However, the ball now felt hollow. Whatever remained of the Ent Lord had been burnt away. He clenched his fist, punched a huge hole, and stepped out. He's alive, the news anchor said with a relieved tone. For the first time in ages, millions were celebrating the survival of a humanoid, but Godfrey wasn't even aware of all of this as a rift opened in front of him. He's leaving, the news anchor said with a slightly saddened tone as Godfrey approached the rift. 2 helicopters came his way, with people like Eliza and Johan hopping to have a word. They obviously knew this alone had made Godfrey gain the public's favor. There would be haters, but millions would be grateful, especially the thousands who were on the bridge and their families. Unfortunately, Godfrey entered the rift before they could make it. The knight in shining armor. Isabella's words make much more sense now, Eliza muttered under her breath. Isolde smiled and folded her arms before leaning on the bed frame. He was growing faster and faster. Soon he would hit divine tier. Godfrey's growth was familiar. She saw glimpses of this throughout her childhood. At that moment, her eyes gained a purple glow. The female doctor walked in a few minutes later and found Isolde already on her feet, making her way toward the door. What are you doing? You need to rest. Your internal system is currently at war. I need a piece of paper and a pencil, Isolde demanded. You saw something, the doctor gasped. She was quite close to the Pendragon family and took care of Isolde from a young age, so sudden demands like these weren't odd to her. But for a while, Isolde had not asked for drawing sheets, unlike her younger self. I'll go get it, you wait here. Some hours later, after giving Isolde all she needed, the female doctor walked into the room and approached Isolde. When she got close, she looked at the sheet on the table and saw a sketch. Isolde used black pencil for the background, while the characters were white. There were 10 of them, huge and towering, with magnificent giant bows seemingly made of a dragon's spine. From their white helms fell a voluminous amount of red hair. It was plume-styled as hair. They also had longswords strapped to their waists, with red billowing cloaks, all made in sketches, rough yet clear enough to give details. How the female doctor knew these knights were huge was because of the small men clad in white hooded robes that they escorted. For some reason, these knights looked like higher versions of the knights she saw on TV. They were like elite royal ones. "What's this?" She picked it up. "I think they call them royal apostles, and those men they're guarding are alchemists. At least that's what I heard one of the apostles say as he spoke. They're magnificent, aren't they?" Isolde said softly. "Are they his?" the doctor asked. "Probably. They seem restricted to just those alchemists, though. If I could see more, maybe it will all make sense." Isolde shut her eyes as she exhaled. "Apostles, one who is sent, so they're like messengers. Messengers of what, good or bad?" the doctor asked. "Godfrey isn't bad," Isolde replied firmly, eyeing the doctor from the corner of her left eye. "The stigma is still there. It's always been and always will. Even you were scared of him when you first saw him in your visions. Tell me, if a child is returning home at night and sees a military officer shoot another man to death and is stained by blood, will she be frightened by that man?" "Of course," the doctor replied. "But the circumstances are that those men attacked the officer first. They were sent to kill him, and he's fighting for his life. How does that redefine the scene?" Upon hearing that, the doctor sighed. "I see what you mean. I've explained it several times. I've learnt not to jump to conclusions until I see the bigger picture. Of course, I was frightened to see an intimidating man in the middle of the night, but as I saw more, I got to experience his story, his pain, his days of innocence, his drive. And now you have feelings for him," the female doctor said as she dropped the drawing. "I think so," Isolde replied after a short moment of silence. "He's growing, and I have to grow too. I think I was able to see this because I've grown stronger. There is more I haven't seen. Knowing the future is keeping him safe." The doctor couldn't help but smile softly. She had never seen anyone so committed. She took the role of a partner even more seriously than her, who was already married. "I'll rest now," Isolde said as she closed her eyes, and her soul appeared in the soul space. She floated like she was in space but void of stars. The only sources of light were the giant null dragonfly, currently a Saint-tier summon, and the hornless white dragon, both of which were also floating in her soul space. The border was made of a cascade of several colored lights, like an aurora. Isolde looked at it and she could sense something looking back, her first summon. In the tallest tower in paradise, Godfrey and Percival kept following Gabriel, who skimmed through books. "What are we looking for? It's been hours." Godfrey couldn't help but complain. Wasn't there some kind of magic that would bring out the book they sought for? How he wished he was a magician. "Aha, I've found it," Gabriel said as he came down from a ladder, and they went to a higher floor above the one with the telescope. There were chairs and a table on this floor, and Gabriel placed the huge book on the table. "This is it, Records of the Great Seer. I believe she possessed the greatest summon able to peek into time, knowing the future and the past, read minds, see another's present, and much more. Her summon was the thousand-eyed owl." Percival entwined his fingers as he leaned forward. "I have not heard of her." "Me neither. If she was that good, we should have at least learnt about it in school," Godfrey added. Gabriel looked at both of them. "You won't. Because her ability allows her to bypass the immunity of angelic summons like mine and Kane's. Some summons are immune to abilities like mimic, seeing, even nuclear weapons, and one of those are angelic summons. And Kane's was a dark seraph, an existence that birthed his purpose." Gabriel looked at Godfrey. "That brings me to you. You stated the reason you both came here was because of Percival, but it's not. It's because of you." Godfrey squinted. "Me?" "Yes, your summons, the Pathani, are a noble race that built their strength and fame without the favor of the mana tree. They adapted artificially, not naturally like the rest of us, and they defeated Kane. Kane is infatuated with ruling, and the Patan Knights can help him conquer not just Earth but other worlds, all of which are interconnected through dungeons. Here's the main part." Gabriel cleared his throat. "Kane isn't dead. He has been watching you, protecting you, and also fighting you all this time." "What? Who do you think your headmaster Sebastian truly is? He's one of Kane's clones who has a life of his own. Another seat at the table of the seven, and all of them were molded from clay by Kane. It's one of the abilities he has, creating beings and bestowing summons to them." Wait, you're saying the self-proclaimed God is my headmaster? Godfrey rose to his feet, his heart pounding against his chest. I'm saying it's just one of his bodies, which has no knowledge that he's Cain, but he's furthering the agenda of his creator. Cain's main body might be dead, but he has multiple bodies out there. How many people know about this? Percival stuttered. This was frightening. The man who suppressed the world was still alive. It made him feel insecure. Both of you, I'm still doing my research. I have no idea who might be Cain's clones. A few might be in paradise. They're everything, living their lives. Some loving mothers, some responsible fathers, and their children are all connected to the mind of their creator. Remember, I said they don't think they're clones. Gabriel stopped when he noticed Godfrey and Percival were still struggling to take it all in. I should probably stop, he sighed. In the evening, Gabriel stood at the tallest part of the tower, looking through a round window at the sprawling, beautiful city of paradise. His arms were crossed as he watched everything. Suddenly, he noticed a young man approaching the tower and opened a rift. The man stepped into it and appeared a few meters behind him. Troubled, Gabriel said as he turned to face the young man, who brought down his hood, revealing his ocean-blue eyes and face. All my life I've believed Adam, the first summoner, saved mankind and vanished. Cain took advantage of this and began a world conquest, but ended up dead, defeated by my knights back when they were in their own world and killed by the authorities. Godfrey looked out the window. His followers cast a huge dark shadow over the world, but now I feel like the entire planet is in the palms of this being. Gabriel looked at him. Cain could be considered a saint tier back then. It was natural, king-queen tiers couldn't harm him. What? Seeing Godfrey's reaction, Gabriel chuckled. Your dungeon raids are few, Godfrey. Make it your life goal to clear not just green gates but blue gates and red gates. Keep count. The more you do, the more you'll discover about other worlds. Summons are at the end of the day beings from these dungeon worlds. Cain's dark seraph was most likely a saint tier upon his moment of awakening, and he was already favored by the mana tree, as was Adam. Gabriel approached the window and leaned against it. Adam isn't a hero like you think. He's a selfish and self-centered man whose only goal was to clear dungeons and get stronger. He didn't care about the state of the world, he just saw means to grow, and when it was exhausted, he left Earth seeking to challenge greater beings. He sighed. Cain, on the other hand, is different. He was once a sculptor that created both figurines and life-size statues. An ordinary man with a very ordinary life, until the apocalypse came and he was one of the first few to awaken. One of his abilities allowed him to enter a space of abundant clay, where he could mold beings, summons, whatever he desired, and life would be given to them. It made him realize he might as well be a god. Gabriel looked at Godfrey. While Adam killed dungeon monsters, Cain spent time in a space unconfined to the concept of time and began to create. Do you know what I think? What? Godfrey asked. I think Cain might be the instigator of the prejudice toward humanoid summoners. Authorities rule the outside world. Paradise is ruled by vagabonds, sanctuary is ruled by fanatics. He has split the world into 3 factions and made us fight ourselves while he watches, Gabriel said. I just need to get stronger. I guess he's behind the scenes all this while, waiting to revive his main body, Godfrey responded, conviction burning in his ocean-blue eyes. He couldn't allow fear to break him. Even if Cain was a god, he wouldn't just bend the knee to him, especially when he wanted his knights. That meant nothing good for him. In a dark room, an alluring beauty whose ability made her too captivating to be resisted by men was on a screen, kneeling with both knees. She wore a silver robe with the hood partly covering her head. She also tied her eyes with a black cloth. This was the grand silver moon, trained and prepared as the spouse of Cain by his followers. My lord, what has happened in Brooklyn has changed the tide. The public will favor the boy, and members of the table might have a change of mind. Her authoritative voice was now sweet and reverent. Is that so? A voice came from the silhouette seated on a leather chair in the dark room. His eyes were fixed on the screen. We believe it to be so. Guilds are already making their moves, and with the relationship of the authorities with him, there is a huge chance he will not consider becoming an agent, Nerissa replied. Didn't people rise up for his mother? Didn't the president speak up for her? Isn't he on our side now? Do not fret, let him return, but keep the bounty. The greed of man is something that is always consistent, the man in the dark room said confidently. The world wasn't so hard to fool, especially when he had been there since the start of this new age. Those fools thought they saw Adam's writing on the mana tree, like Adam would ever care. It was he who wrote it. It was he who was breeding them, manipulating everything to his desire, including their power ranking. Whatever he set as the limit would be a mental limit in their minds, meaning he had made them shackle themselves, thinking if the strongest couldn't get there, how could they? The shackle would not remain forever, but it was already doing its job. "What should we do for you?" Nerissa asked reverently. "Initiate more, feed them with beast summons, and allow them to open parishes in hopes of entering sanctuary. They should keep the world busy." "As you wish," Nerissa bowed, and the television went dark. The man in the dark room spun his chair, grunting softly. "The primal heart stag, a creature whose healing powers only get better upon death, is what I need to have this world truly locked in my grasp. It's much more efficient than more slaughter, and I feel excited at imagining an age where people exalt objects like I exalted my sculptures. With those items they can be resurrected, and it will be a world I created. All men will be grateful." As he spoke to himself, someone knocked at the door. "Sir, you have a guest." He rose to his feet, his imposing height and build intimidating in the darkness, but the moment he opened the door, the man who appeared wore a white suit, had white hair, a full beard with a mustache. He had sharp features and an amicable face. The woman in a tight suit gestured toward the corridor. "Right this way, Mr. Manhattan. Soon all of me will be aware upon the awakening of my true body, and as for Adam, I doubt he lives." Achoo, a man with long, golden-brown hair packed with a golden band, yet still reached his waist, sneezed, as he opened a huge double door weighing countless tons. He held a staff in one hand, and behind him was an infernal world, but this infernal world was filled with corpses, hundreds of thousands of corpses. He rubbed his nose while descending the staircase toward a swirling gate. "I've been sneezing for a century. I'm immune to all types of plagues at my level, but it seems like this sneezing might be incurable, or my strength still isn't enough. I guess killing a 2,000-year-old demon prince is nothing compared to sneezing. What say you, monkey?" A week later, a brown-haired man adjusting his tie walked out of his bedroom to the dining room, where a graceful woman sat with a 16-year-old girl, both having their breakfast. Their house was quite big and luxuriously decorated to match their status. He went straight to his chair, picked up his cutleries, looked at his meal, and paused as his eyes went to the empty seat beside Aurelia, his daughter. "Where's Adonis?" his strong, authoritative voice rang. "He hasn't stepped out of his room for over a week now," the wife of the man replied, like she was speaking about a child throwing a tantrum. "Maybe he's scared that a good number of his classmates were killed," Aurelia stated with a light shrug. The man rose to his feet, went upstairs, and straight to Snow's room. Just as he was about to open the door, it opened from inside, and the man's eyes widened at the sight of his son. Snow's once pure white hair, that he groomed to fall a little below his ear, had been trimmed short. He could see the hair strands on the floor, but the most shocking part was his hair had turned jet black. "Did your summon evolve?" Snow replied with a nod. "It did." "We should go to an institute and do a check," Snow's father said with an excited tone. Snow knew the reason his father wanted to do that was to make a public statement of his evolution once more. What better news than to tell the world despite the failure of the mission, his son worked hard and evolved once more, the perfect son anyone could hope for. He had been keeping up with all this despite being tired of it, because he still loved his parents, but it would never stop if he didn't put a stop to it himself. "I don't want to," he replied. "What do you mean?" His father raised an eyebrow, his tone growing stern. "I said I don't want to. I don't want to become an agent. I don't want to work for the institute or guilds. I prefer going to Brooklyn and living as a freelancer." "What rubbish is that?" Snow heard his mother say as she came up. "For your information, there is no Brooklyn. That place is off the map because freelancers are nothing compared to being an agent. You want to destroy all I've worked for. People look up to you, my son, and you want to abandon all that for a useless, imperfect life." His father pointed at him with anger. "How do you plan to be in school and also be a freelancer? What is the benefit of such rubbish?" "I'm also quitting school. There's nothing for a Saint-tier summoner to learn there." "What is wrong with you? You want to ruin your academics when you're almost done." "Adonis," his mother yelled. Saint-tier, his father's heart shook. With such strength, his son could end up as superintendent, and an entire blue gate would be given to him to protect. Even great houses and the president would know him. "You can't give up your academics," his father said strongly. "I already have. Your rules, your laws are so ridiculous I can't live with my past," Snow snapped, walking past his father. "Leave this home and I'll disown you," his father threatened. "Call my number when you're in danger. If Brooklyn is off the map, Manhattan might be next. You politicians will surely need aid, Snow replied as he walked past his shocked mom. He saw Aurelia at the bottom of the staircase, looking at him. You look good with the new hair, she whispered. You're coming back, right? Snow tapped her shoulder with a soft smile. Probably. Upon leaving the house, he slid his hand into his pocket, brought out his credit card, and tossed it away. His father would block it, and he also wanted nothing to do with his old man's money. Finally, he could feel the vast potential opened up for his summon. Strength coursed through his veins. All his efforts since birth were nothing compared to just eating that fruit. The effect was even better than eating the ones his parents bought. It seemed like fruits from the mana tree had purpose. Those that were brought back were just filled with a great ton of mana, nothing like the kind he ate. Also, eating the fruit in that world produced a lot more effect. That fruit held within it the future possibilities of his summon's growth. Snow understood now, strength was a privilege. Lifting up his head, he saw large screens, most of them with the title, Brooklyn's Crisis, and in the video he could see lots of golden knights fighting an army of Ents. After watching everything, Snow sighed. So he's grown even stronger. Maybe he also ate the fruit. Maybe not. Godfrey is full of surprises, but I'll beat him someday and take second place. He smiled. I might have given up on everything else, but I won't give up on that. For now I'll wander, the wandering Snow. Get excited, Adonis. I'll hold on to this goal. With this in mind, he made his way straight to a blue gate, spotting a small group of summoners about to enter. This was a small blue gate, probably just a fortress full of monsters inside. Hello, can I join you? He approached them. The brown-skinned girl with curly purple hair speaking to the others turned, her eyes widening. Snow, Rowana, the third year that once had a crush for Godfrey that he wasn't even aware of, stammered at the sight of Snow. Her teammates were already gawking at the handsome stranger. Rowana, it's been a while, Snow smiled warmly. Rowana raised an eyebrow. Of course she knew Snow. He was the same as the likes of John, Lilith, and even her close friend that betrayed her. I'm sorry, but we don't have more space, Rowana replied defensively. RIC, Snow turned away. Starting afresh wasn't easy, it seemed. It strung to be rejected. The previous him would have made sure she regretted it, but now, he was just too tired to even afford a feud. Do you know him? Why did you reject him? He looks strong. Rowana's teammates exploded at her, but she stood her ground. He's a king, or at least he wanted to be one. People like that are not the kind we should allow around us. Let's go. In a massive hall, a small team of 4, led by Rowana, who made them 5, faced off against 4 night golems which once stood close to the wall like statues. Golems were known to lack skills, only relying on their durability and physical damage. As the night golems encroached, Rowana's summon, the Firefly, radiated a bright golden light that strengthened her teammates' summons, increasing their strength by 0.5. One of them sent his summon, which was a Nemean lion, a high-tier summon known for its durability and size. Following behind it were 2 6-feet-tall fire ants, billowing with flames. Since their venom had no effect on the knights, they simply tore off any part of the golem's body with their mandibles. The Nemean lion roared, attracting 2 night golems to itself, before slapping their armored chests in with one blow. What are you doing? Anastasia stomped the ground. We need their armor in good condition to sell it at a high price. It would be worth much less right now. We can't afford that. The last time we tried it, someone died, Rowana said. Anastasia sighed and summoned a horde-cheeked chipmunk, almost 7 feet tall. It went to their kill and stored the golem's broken armor parts into its mouth. Its cheeks barely bulged as it stored the armor of 6 tall night golems in its small extra-dimensional pouches located in its cheeks. Let's go, Caleb, the one who summoned the Nemean lion, said, cracking his neck. We're gonna clean the dungeon up. Sean, a young man with curly hair, looked at his father, who was also close to his own fire ant, and chuckled. Someone's excited again. His father looked at Caleb and chuckled. All that muscularity won't work on Rowana, bud. Sean's statement made Caleb glare at him while Rowana smiled softly. Let's head for the next hall. Everyone agreed, but the moment they passed through a hallway and ascended a staircase into what looked like a ballroom, a large space much bigger than the small hall they came from, they saw golem knights littered about. A group of men clad in black combat attire that was made from the skin of at least elite-tier creatures were in the vicinity. The last few golems standing fell to their attacks. Leading them was a man with deadly pale skin, so white it seemed almost impossible to believe this young man, who looked to be in his late 20s, was still alive. A centipede dragon, a chimeric summon with the body of a centipede and 4 dragon wings, with 2 antennas that had thickened into what could be registered as horns. It coiled around the young man's body, lifting its head to the young man's eye level as he caressed the back of its head. "We should leave," Anastasia whispered. They already had a past with these people, a famous freelancing group known as the Black Death. They had approached them to join their group, and Roana's rejection had resulted in bad blood between both sides. "How are they here?" Sean's eyes widened. "Small world, isn't it?" The leader of the Black Death, Scott, said as Roana and her group were about to leave. "What do you want?" Roana asked with a cold tone. She was already irritated by someone this cocky. Had he been in Manhattan, he would have gotten his face pummeled several times by the true monsters. "That chipmunk summoner, you, and the Nemean lion summoner, 3 of you will be great additions to our group. Imagine the millions you could make and it would be less dangerous," Scott stated. "You're telling our teammates to ditch us?" Sean's father raised an eyebrow. "Is there any problem with that, old man? Fire ants aren't rare. You're as common as the dirt below my feet," Scott snickered, and his men laughed. Sean clenched his fist while his father frowned. "Let's just leave," Roana said, but as she turned, one of Scott's men made the earth rise up, blocking the entrance. "Scott, you really want to kill us because we refused your offer? Why are you so petty and insane?" She blew up. Scott's eyes widened in rage as he clenched his teeth. In that moment, his dragon centipede moved like a red phantom. It swiftly grew in size and arrived beside Sean's father. Roana's firefly summoned a golden barrier, but she didn't see the centipede's tail that came for her firefly. Caleb sent his Nemean lion at the tail, only to be slammed heavily to the wall. Debris fell from above while the centipede broke through Roana's barrier. However, Sean's father had already moved. "Where are you going, old man?" Scott scowled as his centipede breathed out purple flames, first at Sean's father and then at the others who had lost that guard at the sight of that. When the flames died down, Roana and her teammates were groaning out of pain. Her shield had protected them, but it eventually broke and they were sent flying into the wall, leaving cracks. "Dad!" Sean burst out in rage as he saw that his father's fire ant had protected him and burned in his stead. The centipede's tail slammed Sean's summon into the wall, grabbed it, and tossed it at the ceiling. Sean swiftly retrieved it and was pinned to the wall by the dragon centipede's tail even before he could react. "Stop!" Tears filled Anastasia's eyes. "Is this how you want to survive dungeon raids? By crying?" Scott clapped. "I never thought of that." His eyes gleamed as he watched Sean's father's summon collapse. The fact that the man couldn't retrieve it meant it was already dead. What Roana called him was infuriating. He wasn't petty. He even delegated money for the orphanage and helped make the lives of his men and their family better. She was just a foolish girl with good looks and a bad mouth who thought she was something because she graduated from Manhattan Summoners High. His dragon centipede released its peak king tier aura, suppressing them further. Caleb shivered as he watched the centipede's underbelly glow with purple light. It was about to roast his friend, but he was too afraid to even move. He had not even faced a Lord tier in his life. Roana's firefly moved, but a green Dana dragonfly appeared from a portal, moved at an insane speed and grabbed the firefly, preparing to bite off its head. But Roana switched places with her summon and stabbed a dagger into its head. The dragonfly tail slapped her, launching her into the wall with cracked ribs. Blood tainted her lips, but the dragonfly and its summoner collapsed. At the sight of this, the eyes of Scott and his men widened in rage. "You'll die the worst death ever," Scott growled as his men summoned their beasts, 2 of the biggest being hyenas with crystal claws. Both were Lord-tier summons. Just then, the earthen wall turned to stone and crumbled, revealing a simply dressed man with captivating looks and gleaming black hair as if oiled. "What are you doing?" he asked while strolling into the room. One of Scott's men sent his hyena at Snow. Since they were seen, they couldn't afford this stranger to live, but midway, the hyena's head fell off. "I said, what are you doing?" Snow asked again as black and green glimmer manifested around him. Scott found himself facing the Nemean lion in a cave without being able to call his summon. It lunged at him, biting and ripping out a good portion of his neck. In reality, Scott held his neck and realized there was a huge opening there. Blood spilled out as he saw all his teammates were already dead. Did they all die from illusions? Who are you? Scott collapsed, dying with disbelief. Rowana couldn't believe her eyes. The snow she knew was strong, but not this terrifying. She had no idea that snow's black glimmer, though it had its own effect, also empowered his other glimmers. Now, if no one couldn't break out of his illusions, any damage they got there would manifest on their bodies, meaning Snow, to an extent, could now manipulate reality. This should be an apology for what I did in the past, Snow said and walked past them, heading for the next chamber. Rowana couldn't close her mouth. Snow was apologizing to her. His strength, it made a king tier look like a joke, Caleb's thought while Anastasia whimpered. Thank you so much, she said while Sean offered gratitude and rushed to his father, who was reeling from the loss of his summon. For the first time, apologizing felt right. He smiled to himself. Oh, and he didn't bother to aid those already badly injured. He wasn't that good, not yet. It didn't even cross his mind. See who it is. Seeing Godfrey walk into the vagabond base with both hands in his pockets, clad in an unzipped jacket, black pants and sneakers, walking in through the two pillars which were like a gate into the base, Dax nudged Percival. Both of them, along with several others, were clustered around 6 large vehicles, as if preparing to leave for a raid. I told you he'll be back before the raid, Percival replied as others began to turn toward Godfrey. Godfrey, Thalia, who sat on the rooftop of one of the vehicles, waved her right hand at Godfrey. He smiled softly and jogged over. You guys are about to leave on a mission and no one informed me. It was the captain's orders, Oliver replied as he opened the door to one of the vehicles and entered the driver's seat. Seeing Percival and Dax's expressions, Godfrey knew Oliver wasn't joking. Every elite class seemed to be going on this mission except him. I had a feeling you would appear before we leave. Meet the captain, he might change his mind, Dax said while Percival patted Godfrey's shoulder. Hurry, both of them entered the vehicle behind them, Dax in the driver's seat, Percival and a female regular class in the other 2 front seats. As the vehicles roared to life, with the regular class taking their seats at the back like soldiers, Godfrey went to the first vehicle. There he saw Arian in the driver's seat with one hand outside the window. Arian looked at him from the corner of his eyes. Tusk, you're like those people who suddenly arrive right when the food is on the table. What's going on? Why wasn't I informed about the mission? Godfrey asked. It's about the elite class vagabond you haven't seen since you came. Well, she's fond of going on long trips like this one, but this time around, we haven't heard from her for 2 months now. She usually sends word on the 1st of every month without fail, Arian explained and lightly hit the metal door. I know with you on this mission, finding her would be much easier, but she's my fiancée and my responsibility, Arian added. So, you're my captain, I am supposed to help. You're not making any reasonable sense with this excuse. If she was your sole responsibility, you wouldn't be going with every other elite class except me, Godfrey countered. Exactly, she's my fiancée and my responsibility. I said that because the Pendragons will be hosting quite a large party now that their daughter has come of age. You know, these great houses and their traditions. Announcements were made yesterday, though it will be more of a family thing. I have a feeling you need to be there more than with me. Godfrey waved his hand. They're not going to marry her off. I'm saying go there. You're the public's favorite for now. Before the authorities ruin it once more, use this opportunity to get closer. Dating a Pendragon heir is being involved in their politics, so go introduce yourself. That's your responsibility. He chuckled. Make sure you have a ring in case it goes well. Life is short in this era. Each dungeon raid is a wager on your life. Tying the knot earlier is better. You don't know how long it will last. Arian started his vehicle. As it roared to life, Godfrey couldn't help but see that his confident and imposing captain might currently be concerned. Anything could have happened to his fiancée in a dungeon. Whatever could silence a squad led by a king or maybe throne tier elite class, and about a dozen other summoners of varying tiers, had to be worth this reinforcement. I bet Isolde would have desperately wanted to inform me, but I don't have a phone. I'll still wear my divine tier hoodie. It wouldn't hurt to be extra careful. Godfrey said as he turned. He paused after a few steps. He was going to see Isolde and meet her parents again, should he get a haircut. His heart pounded. Come on, Godfrey, you're a man, be a man. He encouraged himself, but now that he thought about it again, this was harder than it seemed. Was he already perspiring? God! The next day, Godfrey, with a backpack beside him, sat in a taxi driving through Manhattan. He could see his face on many screens. It looked like he was famous once more, and for good reasons. Debates were ongoing concerning his current actions and his past actions, and whether the bounty on his head should be lifted or not. The authorities were still stoic about the whole thing despite Gate Defenders Guild and Justice Guild stating that he should be free from his wanted status, as people like him would help save thousands more lives. It feels like the authorities are hellbent on my mother's summon. Well, I'm certain they'll do something soon, but coming after me right now will put them in a bad light. They'll lose the faith of the people. It's not like they haven't already messed up the world. He scowled inwardly. Pendragon Island was actually in a Blue Gate dungeon located on one of Manhattan's islands. He would have to board a ferry. Sure, Kane might be everywhere, but he had been there from the start. Knowing about it just made him much more conscious, and if not handled properly, he might go around suspecting every single individual he met, maybe even the taxi driver. Taken wrongly, what Gabriel revealed to him might end up destroying him. With a lot in his mind, Godfrey leaned back, sighing softly. The taxi eventually got him to his destination. He came down, paid the man, and turned. Pendragon Island it is. He boarded the ferry, and it took him to the island. As he descended with the other passengers, Godfrey began pondering how to get to the Pendragon mansion when he saw Isolde's driver at a distance looking at the passengers. Godfrey wore a hood and a face mask. He couldn't be easily recognized, but knowing there was a good chance that man was here for him, Godfrey approached him with his backpack. "You're Godfrey?" the driver asked when he drew near. Godfrey nodded. "I was sent to pick you up. This was my last day here. I wasn't sure if you would come," the man said, sounding quite friendly. Godfrey smiled behind his face mask. "This might not be as tough as I thought. Maybe everyone would warm up to me after what I did in Brooklyn. I have to thank Gabriel when I get back." The Pendragon mansion. Godfrey threw his backpack onto the bed and leaned against the window, looking at the lawn that stretched for several kilometers before trees sprawled out and then the main city beyond. The mansion was definitely built on a hill, and it was massive, as expected of a super-wealthy family. "I should really focus on some important things," Godfrey thought. What Arian said rang in his head several times. It was time to stop thinking of himself as a high schooler who needed his mother's money for everything. Hunting and bringing back beast bodies could make him a multimillionaire in mere weeks. He had been focused on getting stronger, and that was his primary objective, as it was the only way to learn more about his castle and protect his mother, because as long as she remained alive, she would always be a temptation. That was the reason he left Ballista to guard her. He looked at his hand, clenched his fingers, and opened them again. The power in that fist was monstrous. Tearing down a story building with a single blow wasn't a tough feat for him, the same boy who once trained all day just to survive against low tiers. It was surreal. 2 years and some months ago, he had just been a normal human being who would injure his hand if he punched a table too hard. Now he stood in the guest room of the strongest family in the region, a family he could only hear about or watch on TV. His lips curled slightly. He was looking on the bright side. It took a lot to get here, and one of the hardest parts was facing his fear of death with courage and the desire to forge a better life for his mother and himself. The second was taking the life of another. As Godfrey lifted his hand toward the sky, he heard a knock. He turned, walked to the door, held the knob, and paused. A huge scorpion flashed through his mind, forcing his eyes to gleam sharply as he opened the door. "It's Isolde's home, but I still have to be careful." Guarded, he opened the door and froze. Standing outside was Isolde. She wore a black top, and the long sleeves were like netted fabric with black flowers. Below was a plaited skirt that accentuated the curve of her hips. "Finally here," Isolde said warmly. Godfrey smiled. She turned. "Let's go. My parents are waiting for us in the dining room." Godfrey followed after her with a soft smile. So what?" She raised an eyebrow as they walked through the bright corridor. "What are the requirements? Your mother said something about meeting the elders," Godfrey said, forcing Isolde's cheeks to heat up. "Can you stop being blunt? Says the girl who said she just liked my face when we just met. Well, now that I know you've been looking at it in your visions for a while, I can understand," Godfrey replied. Isolde chuckled softly. "I can imagine you blushed." "I did not," Godfrey tried to reply calmly but failed. "I believe you," she replied, though Godfrey could practically drown in her sarcastic tone. "Isolde," Godfrey held her hand, forcing her to stop. "Be honest with me. Do I stand a chance? Am I strong enough to impress them?" Maybe too strong, Isolde's reply stunned him. What? Isolde took a step forward, closing the gap between them. Godfrey squinted as she drew close. Sometimes he doubted he was the bold one. She definitely was. If she hadn't given him signs that he stood a chance, he would have buried his feelings long ago. You stopped Brooklyn's crisis. That's a strength that can't be ignored, but being strong isn't always a good thing. Some members of the Pendragon family don't like my parents because they're domineering and powerful. They can't be controlled, can't be pushed or threatened. Their word is law, everyone bends to them, and many don't want that again. Godfrey frowned. So you're saying they'd prefer you with someone controllable? Yes, you fought back against the authorities. How can someone with that mindset be threatened? Isolde said, her eyes briefly darting toward the maids watching from afar. When the maids noticed her gaze, they withdrew. Once you meet the others, it won't be smooth sailing. They already don't like my personality. I'm powerful enough to ignore them. Pairing up with you will create an even stronger opposition. I see, here I thought my strength was an advantage, Godfrey replied. It is, to my parents, your potential matters more. As long as my father approves of you, the rest of the Pendragons will have to follow. That's what absolute power gives you control, Isolde said before turning toward the staircase. They're waiting. At the dining room, Godfrey sat beside Isolde. Arthur sat at the head of the table, while his wife, Christine, sat to his right. Godfrey stared at the unfamiliar faces around the table. The only one he recognized was Geoffrey Pendragon. You're the one called Godfrey, James Pendragon said. The white-haired, handsome man, Arthur's younger brother, looked to be in his 30s as he studied Godfrey. I am. James smiled softly. I saw what you did in Brooklyn. That was truly heroic. But what was your intention in appearing at such a crucial moment? To show that humanoid summoners are not a threat? Godfrey didn't reply. He knew Arthur fought on behalf of humanity, and James was trying to corner him into saying something that would paint him as selfish. Godfrey didn't know exactly who this man was, but he could tell James hated him. Christine and Arthur continued eating calmly, as if they couldn't hear the conversation. Isolde, however, clenched and unclenched her teeth. Humanoid summoners are a threat, Godfrey said, and so are beast summoners. At least beast summoners don't feed on other people's summons to grow. True, but they kill others in contests for resources, advantages, and selfish reasons inside dungeons. Don't you agree? Godfrey's counter made James clench his teeth, though outwardly he remained calm. He's not just brawn, James thought. That makes him even more dangerous. Why are you antagonizing the young man, James? Mildred, Arthur's older sister and a high-ranking agent, asked. She was higher than a superintendent, and her expression couldn't tell what she was thinking. I think our niece has a poor taste in men. Simple, James stated casually while shooting a glance at Godfrey. Godfrey frowned and looked at Isolde, who silently focused on her meal, but he could tell she wasn't really interested in her food. Was this lunch really lunch? Who would be able to eat properly with such tension? Well, he spoke too soon, as all the Pendragons were eating just fine. Isolde might be affected because he was the subject of this conversation. I doubt my daughter's taste can be poor. I gave birth to her, after all. Christine intervened as she gently wiped her mouth with a serviette. James revealed a strained smile while Isolde whispered, "Thank you," in a soft, almost inaudible tone to her mother. Even with all the love her father showered her with, he usually maintained a neutral stance before the extended family, and he was also analyzing her. She had known from the moment her elder brother passed on that the position of head was now her responsibility. And that meant fighting against people like James, who was being heavily supported to take over after her father. There had never been a female head. A female regent, yes, but never a true head of the family. She might be the first. After Christine's intervention, no one spoke up again. Time trickled by, and evening finally came. Godfrey wore a black suit and examined himself before a mirror. Wow, he didn't think he had ever looked this good in any attire before. It was so well-fitting that Godfrey feared the tailor got his measurements while he slept. The fabric wasn't common. This suit would probably cost over $1 million, and this golden dragon insignia is quite cool. He touched the stylish badge pinned to his collar. The suit accentuated his muscular frame and long legs. As Godfrey came out and walked through the corridor, he noticed maids gawking at him. Some kept looking at him even after he had left a good distance between them. Am I late? As he looked at his watch, an enticing scent flowed into his nostrils. prompting him to lift his head and turn into another corridor. There, about 24 feet away, stood a dazzling beauty. Isolde's wavy hair cascaded down to her waist. She wore a black gown that stopped just before her knees, outlining her body, which she had turned into a devastating weapon to the eyes through years of gym work and beauty care. She also wore rope strap heels, the ones that narrowed the height difference between her and Godfrey, albeit a little. To help her innocent victims, she hung a fur-padded coat over her shoulder, the sleeves hanging loosely by her side as she froze, her purse half open as she was checking for something before he appeared. Godfrey, Isolde stammered innocently as both of them were mesmerized by each other. They had both put a lot into their looks to stun the other party, and it worked. They were speechless. Godfrey smiled. "You look great." Isolde rolled her eyes, but the charming pink shade of her cheeks couldn't be hidden. I admit he was muscular before, but it wasn't that visible. His hair and face were his outstanding factors, but look at his shoulders. Is this the same boy I forced to jog with me? Isolde freaked out inwardly. Godfrey was looking too much like a man, and it sent signals all over her body. Isolde eventually composed herself, but Godfrey watched the entire process with a soft smile. "Why are you smiling?" Isolde bit her lower lip as she widened her eyes, glaring at him. "Nothing." "So you're smiling for no reason?" She raised an eyebrow. "You have no idea how beautiful you look. It's enough to make me smile," Godfrey quipped. Isolde scoffed, but Godfrey suddenly pulled her close and pecked her forehead. He paused there, one hand holding her wrist, the other around her back. The fact that he could easily pull her showed all her guard was down around him. Completely down. He could stab a knife through her throat and kill her on the spot. This was the danger of such emotion between them, and he was glad she had such vulnerability before him. Even if she was a dragon, he would be her knight. Those who could shrug off her claws and flames would face the cold touch of his blade. She was his dragon, and he was her knight. Isolde's heart almost burst, or that was how she felt as they stayed in such close proximity, feeling the heat radiating from their bodies along with their scents. "Godfrey," Isolde said with a very soft tone. Godfrey distanced himself and held his fingers behind him. "Don't worry, no more touching," he chuckled. His heart was also pounding. He just thanked God she didn't hear it. "So down to business. The man who verbally attacked me is James, your father's younger brother, and the other one with black hair who defended me is your father's elder sister, Mildred. Yes, my uncle has quite a lot of backing from other Pendragons. He's not as powerful as my father, but he's so self-absorbed in gaining the position that he can't see all he would achieve there as being a good puppet," Isolde replied. "I have one question though. How many Pendragons are there exactly?" Isolde approached the door before them and swung it open. A grand hall filled with almost 100 people reflected in Godfrey's eyes. Godfrey couldn't believe his eyes. This many people were in just one family, and most of them, apart from those married into the family, had dragons. This was a family where even the weakest might be a lord tier, and quite a good number of them were influential figures in their sectors. Christine, who wore a mermaid dress and was surrounded by women and men, walked out of their midst. "Ladies and gentlemen of the house, I introduce to you my daughter, Isolde Pendragon, and her partner, Godfrey Daniels." Christine's words sparked an uproar. Did she just say partner? It was leaked that he is the golden masked man that fought off the monsters that subdued Brooklyn. "Isolde's partner, that can't be possible," a young Pendragon gasped. Shocked, Geoffrey crackled and sipped his wine. "Don't even think of doing anything stupid. That Godfrey is as terrifying as Isolde. God knows how they fell for each other. I can understand Godfrey falling for Isolde, I mean, most of us went through that stage, but her falling for him is a miracle. I once thought it would be John. He's a vagabond. How can Isolde choose to have a vagabond as a partner?" Whispers and murmurs rang everywhere. "Looks like I received a warm welcome," Godfrey whispered to Isolde, who held down her laughter. It was clear these people had the opposite reaction to his announcement, and she was also shocked that her mother said partner. She was afraid her mother would have opted to say friend instead. That would have troubled her, as it would mean her mother still had lots of reservations. "You look charming," Christine said with a smile. "Thank you," Godfrey replied with a humble smile. A few hours later, Godfrey entered his room and sat on his bed. It was already close to 10 p.m. He cracked his neck and was about to loosen his tie when he heard a knock. "I have not locked the door, at least not yet," Godfrey said casually, but the moment the door opened, he saw Arthur Pendragon standing outside. He quickly rose to his feet. "Come, I would like you to meet the elders," Arthur said. Godfrey quickly followed him. They left the manor and walked through a small path through the forest, and after a few minutes of silence, Godfrey saw a dome-like structure. Godfrey entered with Arthur and found himself in a round hall with 5 stone thrones, with masked men seated on all 5. "This is Godfrey Daniels. I see him as a good partner for my daughter. She's of age, and with the rate of death, denying them their desire in the name of being too young is trivial. He's the one you say has 5 summons. That is good, but this young man is a vagabond. We shall give our verdict after he has completely cleared his name and established himself," one of the elders said. "I recommend him," Arthur said firmly. "You are the head and we stay away from most matters, but this is about our greatest talent and future leader. She has been coming to the island to learn from us. We all know the potential she has. No one can match it. We might change our minds in the next 2 decades. Arthur shut his eyes for a moment. "I know the potential of my daughter's first summon might be of the origin tier, but that's a probability. And I almost forgot to introduce Godfrey properly." Arthur pointed at a diamond-shaped crystal. It looked extremely similar to the one Ronald had. "Go touch it." Godfrey approached it. He didn't know what this thing was. But if Arthur said he should touch it, he must have his reason. The moment he placed his hand on it, a rainbow light burst out of it. Indigo meant divine tier, rainbow meant origin tier. "This is the most talented summoner I and you have ever seen," Arthur stated as shock swept into the hearts of the elders. But at that moment, a golden light tore out, reflecting on the ceiling with stars of different colors. It was so bright everyone was dumbfounded. They couldn't remove their eyes from it until the crystal, so hard that a king tier's flames couldn't harm it, cracked open. "What was that just now?" Godfrey gasped. Once again, he was shocked. It would seem that his tier itself had exceeded origin tier and not just his potential. Now that it had grown, his potential had stepped into a new level. It was like the galaxy, boundless, infinite, and ever-expanding. It shouldn't be possible, but his castle was growing. Nobody, not even Arthur, expected this sudden revelation. Next, Godfrey walked out of the dome, leaving Arthur inside with the elders. They were obviously shocked by his potential, and he had little idea as to what they were speaking about, but as he strolled around the vicinity, the earth suddenly shook. Godfrey turned to the direction it came from. He kept looking in that direction as the sound drew near, and it wasn't just from one place. Deep growls rang in his ears as large, glowing eyes appeared in the darkness behind the trees. As it brought its head out, Godfrey saw a bronze-scaled dragon with crimson eyes. Other dragons came out, massive beasts whose heads were 3 times Godfrey's size. These were the summons of some Pendragons. They weren't sent to kill him, but this was their forest. When he walked through it with Arthur, they stayed hidden, but now it was only him. They revealed themselves. One of them, a red-scaled one with almond eyes, roared at him. The earth shook as it took 2 steps forward. Godfrey remained rooted to the ground, his hands still in his pockets, as the gale from the beast's roar made his hair and suit jacket flutter. "Hello," Godfrey said with a smile as his eyes turned black and gold. The aura of a 17.5 saint tier swept out, forcing the dragons to roar defiantly, yet they all slowly retreated back into the forest. Godfrey turned to the dome and saw Arthur standing outside. Their eyes met. "The elders have accepted you," Arthur said calmly. "Because of my potential." Sounds superficial, but the answer is yes. Strength isn't truly superficial in our world. If you were not supposed to be important, Isolde wouldn't see you in her visions. You two would have also never met, and I would not allow it. She will eventually hold an important position that oversees not just this dungeon but several other blue gates. Her authority is destined to be greater than a president's. Arthur turned away from Godfrey toward the path back to the mansion. "I have no arguments," Godfrey responded as he joined Arthur on the path. "I also believe once they inform any of their descendants, many will want to use me as a puppet." Arthur glanced at him from the corner of his left eye. "You're smart. You were accepted because wouldn't it be better if someone with such potential is on our side rather than the side of another, especially the authorities? Having you would give the authorities a stronger grip on the world. Great families and guilds weaken their control, or we would have long descended into a dictator-type world, controlled solely by the 7 heads." Godfrey sighed. "I thought getting stronger would make me relevant. I really didn't think much about what being relevant meant." Hearing that, Arthur chuckled. "It means you'll be wanted. Some Pendragons will pull strings at you, taking advantage of your relationship with Isolde. Guilds will want you, those you reject might harbor grudges. At the top, it's more competitive, and Death's blade is just a hair's breadth from chopping off your neck. Arthur smiled. By the way, do you know about the first Pendragon? Godfrey let out an embarrassed laugh. He must have scored negative points in Arthur's mind, since it was obvious he didn't have a clue who the first Pendragon was. Many Pendragons don't even know the true story. The one who birthed the Pendragon family was a woman, but her surname wasn't Pendragon, it belonged to the man who had a dragon. Her summon was a red colossus golem, one of the summons in the first decade after the apocalypse. She had the ability to make armor that strengthened people and enhanced their size, increasing their strength and giving normal human beings the ability to fight low-tier monsters. Arthur walked ahead. They would soon leave the forest. The edge drew nearer with each step. One day, a red gate opened and people were slaughtered. Her summon and its ability couldn't match the scale of her enemy, and that's when the dragon summoner came. Flames fell from the sky, she wrote, and he dropped like a god. That's when their story began. Unfortunately, he was poisoned by a dungeon boss 2 years later. No one they could access back then could heal him, and so he transferred his summon to her. It was the only way for a part of him to live, and that woman took up the name of Pendragon, forever wearing a helmet and armor that made many mistake her for a man. Arthur turned to Godfrey. She gathered other dragon summoners, forming a family, the Pendragon family, whose sole duty was to protect humanity from dungeons. We fight with claws, flames, fangs until they all fall, or we fall. So they don't know it was this woman who birthed this family? Godfrey asked. Most people think they were an ancient family that all had dragon summons or summoners of dragon subspecies. It's not odd for a family to have the same kind of summon. The Ouroboros family is an example, Arthur replied calmly. He stopped at the edge of the forest. Before them was the lawn, leading up to the mansion, which glowed brightly under the dark night sky. The last requirement is clearing the Elf Continent dungeon, a blue gate dungeon. The next leader of the house and his partner have to enter. It's usually a journey that draws both individuals closer, as they would have to depend on themselves for a period of a month. Arthur's statement made Godfrey raise an eyebrow. We clear the dungeon and I and Isolde can. Can what? Arthur snapped, prompting Godfrey to lean his head back. Tusk youth these days. Arthur scowled. This Blue Gate dungeon is as big as ancient Africa before some parts of it were eaten off by the land devourer. Godfrey didn't even want to ask about this land devourer, as he could already sense it was a depressing story. Something that could eat a portion of a continent had to be devastating. There is no human settlement in this dungeon. It's just a sprawling forest with snow and mountains filled with beasts and snow elves that will hunt you down. Make sure you leave tracks so you can get back to the portal. Time also moves differently there. That's rare. It is rare indeed, but there's a reason, and that is this dungeon doesn't abide by the laws of our world, it abides by that of the elves. 1 hour here is a day there. 1 year there are 15 days here. So 1 month will be, Godfrey's eyes widened, 2 years. Yes, that's how time flows in the elven world. A 24-year-old elf is a 1-year-old human. A 1,000-year-old elf is a 41-year-old human. Your stay there shouldn't exceed the time I've given, or there will be a shift and you will age several times faster, dying in months. You went there with your wife? Godfrey asked. Arthur nodded. We stayed less than a year, though. We couldn't survive any longer, but we weren't as strong as both of you. I believe you two can also reach the depth and find the dungeon boss. Entering such a dungeon sounded entertaining. It would be a great opportunity for his knights, as he was adamant about lifting their tiers. Constant battles were one way of increasing tiers. Even though it wasn't as fast as dungeon cores, it produced excellent results as the experience also trained the mind. His knights had their fair share of battles, but more wouldn't hurt, especially now that they were immortal. And what made Godfrey even more excited was that this mission was going to be him and Isolde solely. Frey, Godfrey heard Arthur say. It sounded like a nickname that he always wanted but never got. He looked at Arthur's solemn face. Isolde had an elder brother. We adopted him and hoped he would lead the house, as I preferred Isolde stayed out of politics. He ventured a little too deep as he wanted to clear it. We found his corpse and that of the young woman who was his partner. Arthur's eyes gleamed. No duo has cleared that dungeon. Most haven't even gone deep, including me and my wife. We were young back then, 17 years old. If you want us to clear the dungeon, we will, Godfrey said. Arthur lifted an eyebrow and began to walk without another word. He was sending them off to experience a bit of how the world was before this fragile order came. Then it was all about survival. Monsters hunted humans so much that many loathed being alive, and yet never had the guts to kill themselves. The moment Isolde stepped into that dungeon, it was an official announcement that she was now out of his control. Both her and that young man would be officially considered a pair, adults left to do whatever they wanted as per their law. It was annoying thinking about it, but he and his wife were even younger. He just hoped Godfrey would meet his expectations and slay the dungeon boss who had taken the life of several Pendragon heirs. Some people entered the dungeon and came out closer, some came out with hatred toward each other, some came out alone without their partner. What would be Godfrey's fate? Would the situation force him and his daughter to split up or become even closer? Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story, and if have any suggestion to a new novel or want next part of any series, comment down.